The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Actually,
are we going to make this a fast one?
Yep, speed pod.
Oh, yeah.
We've only got 3 hours and 20 minutes to knock off the pod and then get to somewhere where geographically it's level 2 at midnight. Escape to Topor.
Huntley.
Huntley will be fucking going off at midnight.
Malolele, no mai haere mai. It is 8:42 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, September the 7th. This has gone by lunchtime. We're in alert level 4, although we were just talking about whether or not we might make a break for it to Huntley later on this evening when the drawbridges go up and the rest of the country moves to Delta level 2 in the city-state of Auckland. Kia ora, Annabelle Lee Mather.
Kia ora, Toby Manhire and Ben Thomas.
Also Ben Thomas. Kia ora, Ben Thomas.
Kia ora. If while you're listening to this, you are in alert level 2, wherever you are in Aotearoa, send help. Send food, send supplies.
What would you like, Annabelle? What would you like to be couriered to you by a level 2 fan?
Can Ben go first? I need to think about that. I have complex needs.
Okay. Ben?
If some of our friends who just happen to be passing through from Te Tai Tokoro to level 2 further down the country, just on their way, if they wanted to throw a giant heated bag full of KFC, onto the roadside in fashionable Eden Terrace. Just think about it. A lot of stuff could fall off during your mad dash through the COVID-ravaged wasteland of Tamaki Makaurau.
Through the Suez Canal of Auckland. You two can be what was the name of that ship?
Oh, the Evergreen? The Evermore? Whatever it's called.
Bells.
If we're getting food deliveries and it's coming from Te Tai Tokiro, I'd like some fry bread. But my main issue lockdown is that I've got some alcohol in my liquor cabinet, and I've got some mixers in the fridge, but nothing matches each other. So I need some pairing. So if somebody could drop off some nice
So you'll do a swap. Are you offering to do you're offering to open up trade channels to our friends in alert level 2.
Contactless, obviously, but yes.
Well, the struggle is real. Annabelle Lee Mather doesn't have the mixes that she wants to go with the spirits she's got. Ti here's with us as well. I don't know whether I can. He's got a microphone in front of him. Is there anything you'd like Ti here brought to you to the Badlands of level 4?
Maybe pies from a bakery.
But I think you can actually get those, can't you? Level 4.
Can you?
No.
Did you not know that?
That's not legit, is it?
Pasadena pie.
No, they don't. All the bakeries are just selling it's all all those arguments in Australia over whether something's value added or not. So salted nuts have GST and unsalted nuts don't. So it's all the bakeries are selling a croissant. But that's it. Nothing that's been improved by having pastry wrapped around meat.
Nah, I don't want any of that shit. I want a jelly-filled pie from a bakery with like a whole thing of chips.
Okay. It's just
Can I tell you a traumatic lockdown story about not having something you really need?
Yes.
So I really needed tweezers, but I didn't have any. And as one goes down the path of life, one's stray eyebrows start to stray further than their eyebrows and potentially onto other parts of their face. And
or different parts of the body entirely sometimes.
Yeah, so I was having that situation, but I had no tweezers. And then finally my 21-year-old confessed that she had some, but she wouldn't let me pluck them myself and insisted on plucking them for me in the dining room in front of other family members, and it was a really humiliating, traumatic experience. So
there's something deeply kind of lockdown day 19 about that, isn't there?
And she made really horrible comments while she was doing it, like, "Oh my God, Mama, gross." It was really hurtful. Next time I'll stock up on a lot of tweezers when we're back in level
thanks
2.
Tia for staying up late to record this shambles. Thank you to Spin-Off members for making this shambles possible at all. Thank you to the big bad boys of Brexit. Anyone else we want to thank? I feel like we've been sort of fallen short a bit lately on the thanking.
I was complaining about my shitty Zoom connection. Because of my idiosyncratic house. And Vodafone, my internet provider, alighted on this and sent me out their new smart Wi-Fi solution. So if I don't drop out during this podcast, then let's thank Vodafone. And if I do, then let's rain terror down on them.
This is some real influencer content going on right here. How did you guys get on in the great internet shutdown, or were you on one of the posh internet services last Friday?
I missed the whole thing. I was fine.
Okay.
Oh, I'm Vodafone, so I think it was, who is it? It's Vocus. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well.
But it was the Russians, right? Was it the Russians?
Down here, about you, T.I. here, was your internet all right?
Yeah, no issues.
Okay, well, that's good. Well, I'm really happy for all of you.
It was about the only thing that was fine with New Lynn on Friday.
Wow, that's a segue, bro. Well, look, let's talk about that. It was a hell of a Friday, and we found out on Friday afternoon the news started sort of seeping through that there'd been a stabbing at the Countdown at Lynn Mall in West Auckland, and we gradually kind of got bits of information and learned that a man who'd been under 24/7 surveillance by police had gone into the supermarket and grabbed a knife off the shelf, and he ended up injuring 7 people before he was shot dead by one of the plainclothes police officers. Mercifully, no one, as we speak, has died apart from the attacker. And I guess... Yeah, I mean, Jacinda Ardern gave a press conference shortly afterwards alongside Andrew Costa, and she wasn't able to give all of the information because there were suppression orders in place. But we found out the next day that the man had arrived as a student from Sri Lanka. He had subsequently gained refugee status, had been in and out of prison, and was known to sympathise with ISIS and had materials around that showed his support for that organisation. And then I guess there were a couple of questions that emerged out of that as far as the politics goes. One was everything done that could have been done to stop everything leading towards that awful scene on the Friday afternoon? Did police and the corrections and the Crown make the right calls? And then I suppose coming out of that, if there was something missing in the law, specifically whether there is a missing bit of law that makes planning a terrorist act a criminal act, which it isn't currently in New Zealand, but the legislation that stemmed out of the Royal Commission, which looked into the Christchurch mosque shootings, that's currently in select committee. And we've learned that is now going to be expedited and going under urgency, and the Prime Minister has said before the end of the month. What's your take on all this, Ben? Are you worried about legislation being made too quickly in response to a terrible event?
Yeah. Look, I think that's there's two major concerns that come out of this. The first is, was there something missing in the law? So I think it's long been accepted that there is, and this goes way back to 2008, when David Collins, the then Solicitor General, since a High Court judge, I think now on the Court of Appeal, refused to give leave for prosecution under the Terrorism Suppression Act for the sort of cosplayers up in Te Urewera, who were apprehended in this very sort of theatrical kind of Operation 8, which had sort of widespread fallout, I think, for the communities, particularly up in Ruatoki, where those raids took place. Look, I think that, obviously it's terrible to talk about, things going right in this case, because you don't ever want to see a situation where, I think it was five or six people are taken to hospital, some of them with serious wounds. But you would have to say this is a good outcome and a vindication of the activities of our police and our security intelligence agencies. Andrew Little, in a ministerial statement today in Parliament, gave a good breakdown of, how exactly do you kind of criminalise planning for a terrorist act. Because, obviously, for instance, using 9/11, which is where all of these laws sprung from, you don't want to wait until people have crashed into a tower. That's far, far too late, right? But under the current laws, planning is not an offence. And, Andrew Little set out, the difficulties, at what point can you sort of say, well, we can apprehend this person. If there's a number of people involved, it's easy enough. There's a conspiracy, right? You've got an agreement between people. They're holding each other to this. They've made a plan. If it's just an individual, and this was clearly a pretty disturbed individual, without getting into sort of armchair diagnoses. This guy was not Osama bin Laden. He was never going to bring down the government of New Zealand or do anything even approaching that. He was just dead set on getting a knife and stabbing someone over quite a long period of time. How does the law accommodate that while not catching people who, might be sort of cosplaying and playing soldiers up in Te Urewera, which I think everyone kind of agrees was an overreach, under these laws. So, these are tough questions, and I don't think there's any reason for them to rush it under urgency. I mean, without sounding glib, we are safer than we were a week ago. There's no pressing need to rush this law through without making sure that you're getting it right, because you do have dangers on both ends, which is not catching the people you want to and then catching people who shouldn't be swept up in terrorism laws.
Yeah, I mean, I was living in the UK during a period after the 2007 attacks and that post 9/11 environment, and there were some pretty draconian laws that were passed in the wake of those appalling events that saw things like extraordinary renditions and quite a lot of demonising of communities. And the danger with making laws in a hurry, Annabelle, is that you leave them open to be abused in the future by authorities who want to crack down on individuals or groups that may or may not be the ones that the original lawmakers had in their mind.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as Ben says, we've already seen that happen in Aotearoa, and I think he's right that we shouldn't be rushing through this type of legislation through urgency. Just to your point, Toby, about about post 9/11 and some of the security measures that were brought in after that. I know that in parts of the Pacific where the new aviation rules applied, and all of a sudden all of these tiny little Pacific Island communities were required to build all sorts of huge crazy fencing around airports and introduce all sorts of security measures that created a real problem too. But in terms of this individual, I know the Mental Health Foundation was very quick to come out and say that, you know, what he did is not necessarily a mental health illness, but clearly he was a very disturbed individual, and it made me think about, you know, what is the type of support we put in place for refugees, because dealing with mental health is difficult enough when it comes to New Zealanders who are born here and already here. And I think it's, you know, an area where we probably could offer a lot more support to the organisations that work with those type of people.
Yeah, and this is one of the issues is, you know, we've seen a lot of commentary. I think, you know, generally people are quick out of the blocks to say, let's not, you know, and the Prime Minister was quick to say this, and a lot of journalists have been as well, you know, let's not tar, you know, obviously the Sri Lankan community in New Zealand
Absolutely.
with the actions of this one person. I mean, quite clearly, right? And there is a question, you know, especially now that we have this issue of basically a flood of people coming out of Afghanistan, when there has been a move, you know, particularly in an excellent column and stuff in the Dominion Post last Wednesday by me, saying that we should take more Afghan refugees. It would be a shame if you know, this in some way was used as sort of a reason to say that we needed to have more resources and we can't look after the refugees we have. Because, you know, look, I mean, this, to my knowledge, this is a complete outlier. I don't think we've ever had anything similar to this in the refugee community in New Zealand before.
It's certainly an aberration. And, I mean, one of the small comforting things is that it's very clear from all the people who are privy to this information, including the leader of the opposition, that this is one of... You can't count on... You only need one hand to count the number of examples like this in the country, which is something.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spinoff. As we find ourselves navigating a new outbreak and lockdown, everyone here at The Spinoff remains committed to bringing you quality independent journalism, which, of course, includes our coverage of COVID-19. It's not an exaggeration to say we couldn't do this work without the generous support of our members. So, if you'd like to help us keep Aotearoa informed, please visit thespinoff.co.nz/members for more details and to donate today.
So, on Monday, that being yesterday, the Prime Minister confirmed that all of the country, apart from the People's Republic of Auckland, would be returning to level 2, or something called a Delta level 2, which has variously been called a level 2 plus and maybe a sort of version of 2.5. But basically the point is that most of the country gets to go out and have a feed or go to the pub or go to normal shops or resume something that resembles in some way reality, that being a level that is no longer called lockdown. And it's an interesting thing. I don't know what you guys think. I don't think anyone was madly surprised by that. It seems reasonable. It seems reasonable, first of all, that the rest of the country gets to move down a level, and second of all, that Auckland remains in this most strict lockdown. But it does create an interesting, I suppose, juxtaposition. It's the first time, I think, that there has been a gap of 2 levels between one part of the country and another. How's it gonna play out? Peer into your crystal ball, Annabelle Lematha, and tell us.
I personally think that the Prime Minister should have announced that until Auckland can, nobody else should be allowed to have takeaways in the rest of the country, because I just think it's a massive injustice, and I think we all know that really the rest of the country are just jealous of Auckland. And
Or maybe there should be
this whole
like
COVID thing is just like sweet revenge for them because we're the city of sales.
there's no COVID. It's just the final vengeance against the evil 09 brigade. Do you think there should be like a level 4 day every 3 days in the rest of the country, just sort of so they can,
Penance, yeah.
understand what it's like up here?
At the very least, like, you know how when you post stuff on Facebook about COVID now, it brings up the little warning? Like, there should be something so if people try to post their fast food photos, it gets, like, taken down.
Flagged.
Or just warning, this sounds really, really sanctimonious. Do you want to post this tweet?
Something like that.
Okay, counterpoint. I do resent people that I don't know enjoying themselves while I'm,
Yes, but we're talking about alert levels specifically.
But but see, actually, because part of the problem with the kind of the sort of descent into madness of level 4 is that in addition to being like, penned in your home and allowed out for one stupid little walk every day, like a dog or something, anytime you kind of try and get respite from that by, contacting, your friends or loved ones or family, you say, so what have you been up to today? And they go like, nothing as required by law. And so and so it turns into this kind of deadening sort of exchange. And I actually don't mind the idea that, I will be able to reach out to people who are doing anything just so that they can slightly live vicariously through them, like a little bit, like I'll get mad at them, sure, in time. Will it permanently damage our relationship? Yes, but day to day, it might give me some cessation of just like the numbing tedium of level 4.
One of the interesting things that is coming out of all this is they're now introducing, I think it's once every 7 days, people who are routinely crossing in and out of the fortress, Auckland, will be required to do testing. And in the course of that, Ashley Bloomfield said today or yesterday that there's going to be much more routine saliva testing, which seems kind of overdue, right? Like I cannot pretend to understand the intricacies of this, and I understand there are arguments for and against, but it really does seem like if you're asking people to get quite routine testing and what they call surveillance testing, which is the way that they're regarding it, that it is just people are a lot more open to the idea of spitting in a tube than they are of getting something stuck up their nose.
Have you guys been tested in level 4 again this time yet? I got tested and it was unpleasant. Like, it was fine, but, it was like a sort of weird feeling. But the strange thing was it was unpleasant in a different way to how I remembered. Like, it didn't feel like I remembered from, I think last year was the last time I got a test. And I don't know. Maybe they just change it every time just to keep you on your toes. But
maybe you've changed.
Maybe I've changed. Maybe my nostril exercises are working, and it's just a whole different ballgame there. I don't really understand the science either. All I know is that most of the experts have said that we should be getting saliva testing, especially for that routinized surveillance, and particularly for essential workers, up and running much, much sooner. There have been a number of articles about why this hasn't happened initially a few months ago. Nobody could figure out why, including the Ministry of Health and one of the companies that they had contracted to start doing it. So, it's just one of these sort of inexplicable failures. And, I think the Bluetooth issue was another one of those in terms of, we learned that for the first 2 weeks of lockdown, the contact tracing, which we'd been told was at a gold standard as a result of various reviews and upskills last year, wasn't even using the Bluetooth information that the app was collecting. And no satisfactory explanation was really given for that, kind of grab bag of sort of deferrals were sort of issued. But it honestly does seem sometimes like the reactive response really is just a number of bureaucrats and politicians kind of juggling things in the air, and sometimes they just drop them and just forget about it. You know, they're kind of like characters who get introduced early in a mini series on Netflix, and they're like the woman who gives birth at the beginning of White Lotus. You know, they come. You know, Bluetooth tracing was meant to be this integral part of our response. It appears on screen at the beginning, and then you never hear about it again. And there just seem to be a bunch of loose threads like that. You know, saliva testing is another one of them. And, you know, you get the idea that, you know, we are still being, you know, we still have something less than a fully cohesive response, you know, that people just kind of forgot about.
That's no doubt true, but at the same time, there are a lot of people both within and particularly outside New Zealand who were saying that COVID zero or elimination, or call it what you will, is a fool's game. They'll never do it. They can't stamp it out. And we've just had days of 2020 and 21, which, as my brother-in-law said, is like a good game of blackjack. And we are stamping it out, Annabelle.
We are. We're stamping it out.
Are you feeling good about it? Are you feeling good?
I am feeling good about it. I read a really interesting article on Newsroom the other week about the threat that Delta poses for children, obviously the under 12s. And so I think, you know, until there is a plan for how we protect them, because obviously the Pfizer vaccine isn't approved for children that young, that we are morally bound to keep pursuing an elimination strategy.
In terms of the criticisms of the response to COVID, no, I don't think anyone would disagree that an essential part of that is Her Majesty's loyal opposition. And so no one would argue that the National Party should not be leading the charge in that regard. But what we've seen in the last week and a half as Parliament has returned is quite a spectacular immolation on the part of Judith Collins, at least at the first part, in terms of making the story. She would argue, in the way that a sailor complains about the sea, that it was the media that did that, making the story about her return to Wellington rather than about the need for an opposition. What did you make of all of that, Annabelle, as it played out?
I thought the interview with Indira was kind of bizarre, particularly the line that she was running that, you know, that there was some sort of left-wing conspiracy against her, and that, you know, why wasn't the media asking questions about vaccine, and she was the leader of the opposition, she wasn't the story. But anyone who is an elected member to Parliament is open to scrutiny and is not above being questioned by the media. And the stance that she had taken on you know, refusing to have a virtual Parliament, I think was absolutely a worthy question line. One of the things that I thought was interesting was when, you know, as someone who has railed about how bad the vaccine rollout has been, is that all of her MPs have been vaccinated. So it can't be that bad.
Ben, that came on the same day as, I think that interview on Breakfast with Indira Stewart was on the same day as Judith Collins stood up in the first returning of in real life Parliament and kind of let rip what seemed like a pretty unhinged speech attacking really hard Grant Robertson. And I thought it was quite marked in its contrast with when the COVID response spokesperson, Chris Bishop, stood up, having very recently been stripped of the role of the shadow leader of the House, and began his speech by saying, "This is great to see people being vaccinated. Tribute to essential workers, blah, blah, blah." What happened to her on that day?
Yeah, so, you know, if you go back to first principles, I think, you know, entirely constitutionally appropriate that Parliament reconvenes probably that it's done in person. I don't know how many of us have had 120-person Zoom calls. I'm not sure that they work out particularly well. This idea that it was a huge threat to safety seemed very, very overblown to me. If people can go and click and collect their burger fuel, I think they can probably have a few people running around the giant dusty halls of Parliament without causing a public health crisis. In terms of a day of horrors, I think there has a lot of the criticism that National, had the focus on themselves, starting off with Collins's reshuffle, which really seemed a bit punitive against, some of the better performers in her caucus. Bishop, Eric, and Nicola Willis was moved off the Finance and Expenditure Committee. Then followed it up with, I don't think I've got a lot of time for Indira Stewart. I think she's a very good journo. The interview was not great, and it kind of became a bit of a quagmire for both of them. At the same time, the opposition leader should never, get into that kind of area, particularly of attacking the media and getting bogged down for, it was almost 9 minutes. It was a very long time to just seem like you're a bit crazy on TV. The other thing, actually just on the point, one of the things that Collins said before the interview went really off the rails was that they couldn't do Parliament by Zoom because none of them had ever been taught how to use Zoom. And actually from that interview, I kind of got that idea. There seemed to be like some sort of like $10 Kmart ring light that was sort of washing out. She looked like she looked like she was emerging from one of those vortexes in a Marvel movie or something, just blinding everything.
It reminded me of someone who'd never used a telephone before and was just sort of shouting into the telephone in the hope that the little man inside there would hear. It was a kind of...
And I think a lot of these problems were tonal problems rather than anything really substantive. When we got into the House later that day, that speech, which did attract a lot of derision and did look kind of manic, had that been in a full House of Parliament with people barracking and booing and
waving
cheering
paper,
and stuff, it would have been totally normal, right? But what it looked like was, have you seen those World Wrestling Entertainment WWE shows that they've had since the pandemic started in America, where they have them in an empty arena?
Right.
And you have all these guys, doing their sort of, Stone Cold Says So sort of, they call them promos in the ring, and they'll stop for where there would be booing or cheering, and they do them in that kind of exaggerated way. And when you don't have the crowd in there reacting to all of those cues, they look like they're mental. And, it's this kind of incredible sort of postmodern sort of Brechtian theatre performance. And I think that's sort of what we saw in Parliament. And I think you're right. Bishop and Robertson himself adapted to those changed circumstances much better than Collins, who just sort of, in acting as you normally would in Parliament, in this new environment, looked very out of place.
And have you been watching a lot of wrestling, Ben?
Not a lot, no. But keeping in touch. If you Google WWE empty arena shows, you'll see some great content.
I was just going to say I disagree, Ben, about the interview with Indira. I didn't think that Indira got into a quagmire at all. As the leader of the opposition, everything she does through COVID is essentially, we're looking at it from the perspective of how would she manage it as a leader. And I thought all of the questions that Indira raised in that interview, what contacts she'd have with the Pacifica community who've been primarily impacted by the latest outbreak, the reason why she had returned to Parliament, how many of her MPs have been vaccinated, all of that was totally reasonable, and it probably wouldn't have gone on for as long as it did had Judith not continued to scream down the computer at Indira.
Oh,
who is very gracious.
But that doesn't...
Indira didn't raise her voice. Indira was very gracious.
But that doesn't seem... What you describe, Annabelle, doesn't seem like that, like, high level...
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour government.
a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
Most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the 4th Labour government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on The Spin-Off or wherever you get your podcasts.
Kia ora, I'm Alex Casey, senior writer at The Spin-Off. We wouldn't exist without the ongoing support of our generous members. If you're able to, you can make a donation at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Distinction level sophisticated politics, it's 101. You say, well, what I don't think that the important conversation here is X. What I'm here to talk about is Y, and you just hold the line, be patient, and I don't really understand what was going on.
And kind of giving Indira a dressing down for the questions that were being asked at the 1 o'clock slot. Indira isn't a press gallery reporter. She's a presenter on the breakfast show. So why are you all like ranting and raving at her about it when actually all of the press gallery reporters have been asking those questions literally, for the last 2 weeks non-stop? It was a bizarre interview.
But blaming the media is... It's a terrible thing to do during an interview, and to then start blaming the interviewer themselves during the interview, compounds it, makes it much, much worse. I don't think anyone would argue that Collins had just a terrible, terrible, terrible beginning of the week. Obviously you can't say anything good came out of this. It was definitely heartening to see that she was much more statesmanlike, after the events of Friday and in reacting to that.
And she's very good on Q&A on Sunday as well.
She got her centre back, I think, when something important and serious was happening.
I thought I personally, I think it's probably a good idea for her to be in Wellington. I mean, it was interesting to see Carolyn McKelney, who's the Director of Public Health, say in one of the press conferences in the last few days that she'd been up to Auckland to go and observe some operations and come back down, and from Wellington Level 3 to Auckland Level 4 and back again. And I think that's fine. But I also think that the Leader of the Opposition is a very essential worker, and if Wellington is the place to be, so you can address the press gallery and you can speak from the places you want to speak, that's fine. So it's as much, I feel like somehow they misjudged so much of this to lose an entire week talking about themselves, but also whether or not they would have been better to simply insist that the Epidemic Response Committee, which we saw last time around, I think we even talked about on the last pod, whether or not that would have been the solution, where you get the opportunity to call ministers, to call officials, and to have sustained questioning rather than the kind of Punch and Judy nonsense of question time.
Yeah, the government had ruled that out, though.
I don't think that's so. I don't think they had.
Yeah, they were very. The Prime Minister said that it was a different world, that committee existed because at the time National was the largest party in Parliament. There were 3 parties in government, as opposed to the majority party, the majority government that we have now. So I don't know that they would have given on that. Labour have pointed to the fact that there were that their chairs did allow the majority of questions in the virtual select committees to be asked by National MPs in the days leading up to the return of Parliament. I think that's inevitable. Of course, they were going to be on their best behaviour. They'd been given a dressing down by the Speaker for their conduct chairing committees, in a partisan way. And they were, of course, going to, put their best foot forward in talking about why, that was a better alternative than reconvening Parliament down in Wellington. So I don't think they get any points for that. I don't think either party, covered itself in glory on that. National, a bit of a no-win, in the sense that if you do reconvene Parliament, you are sort of rattling around in this haunted house and you get the kind of outcomes that we saw last week.
I don't think there's any, question that as leader of the opposition, it's appropriate for her to be in Wellington. It's more about requiring Parliament to sit again, and all that entails, even with the reduced staff. The people that go and clean Parliament at night who might come from, vulnerable communities when it comes to COVID, those are more of the issues, or MPs who represent communities with low vaccination rates and all of that sort of stuff in the middle of a Delta outbreak was more the issue, rather than whether or not Judith Collins herself should be in Wellington.
Let's deal with then the other leader of the opposition, David Seymour, who made some headlines, I guess it's fair to say, yesterday when he tweeted a Māori priority vaccination access code for the Waipira Trust vaccination centre at the Trust Arena in West Auckland. And then immediately after that, he sent out a press release saying, why should some be able to jump the queue and others have to wait for weeks? Annabelle.
I mean, what do you say about... we'd like to get David Seymour on the Hui this week, so I feel like I'm a little bit limited about what I can say, but you just have to question the logic. Obviously, he wasn't putting out press releases and sending out codes when the 65 plus age group were getting vaccinated, or any of the other sectors of society who are rendered vulnerable by COVID. Exactly. So why you would choose to do it when it comes to Māori, who we know have a far greater chance of dying from COVID. I mean, we had a whānau on the Hui on Monday night who lost 2 whānau members, and several members of their whānau also ended up fighting for their lives. Like, it's already costing lives. So why you would incite a sense of feeling begrudged when Māori are already lagging behind in the vaccination rates, you just have to question, like, I don't know. What do you say? What can I say about that?
It was interesting. I thought that Judith Collins didn't want to debate it, which is, given the commitment to the demanding of the debate, was curious to me. But Ben, this is just the most cynical of politics, isn't it? It's just everyone who's been paying attention knows the reality of health for Māori in New Zealand. Everybody knows the risks that are involved with COVID-19 and the pandemic for Māori Pacifica communities. Everybody knows, if you're paying attention, what's more. As Rawiri Jensen pointed out in a piece for the spin-off today, even if you don't want to get involved in that sort of stuff, it is for the betterment of the entire country that populations whose rates are lower are prioritised in order that we get the fucking rates up. I mean, it's I don't know. I don't know if there's any...
Vaccinating Māori and prioritising them to get vaccinated somewhere that makes them feel safe to go and want to go, that actually protects the worried and well of Epsom. So why you would sabotage your country's, like, vaccination rollout is just...
David Seymour's got a lot right in recent months, hasn't he, Ben? He has been shot up the polls. It's been discussed, including, I think, on this esteemed podcast, whether or not he earns the mantle of the opposition leader with the National Party struggling. But this just... Is there any defence for this? Is there even any devil's advocacy for this? It just seems contemptible.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it was a real dick move, right? Not even, not just, or not even for the reason that, the particular vulnerability of Māori communities, but more for even the point that he was trying to make, which was the prioritisation, which is that it's open slather right now for everyone. Everyone's got time to sit in a queue. We're all in lockdown, right? Like, No one's got anywhere else better to be in Auckland right now. And actually, if you're really committed to getting a jab quickly, you can find either pharmacies or the walk-ins or the drive-ins where you can get vaccinated. You can bring that very much forward. And the other point is, the Waiparere, they were were they the first site that started vaccinating in Auckland? I think they were. And they've done about 53,000 people, of whom only about 3,000 have been Māori, even though that's actually the community that Waiparere is set up to service. Heaps of middle-class white people I know from central Auckland have been going out to West Auckland, jumping the fucking queue this whole time since, and forcing their way through because, they want to get their vaccinations out of the way. So this idea that somehow Māori are stopping ACT voters from getting vaccinated in a timely fashion, it's just ludicrous. So it doesn't even stand up on its own internal logic, even if you didn't accept, that Māori were more vulnerable. That the other argument, of course, or the other thing is that we actually need everyone vaccinated because the government hasn't set a target, right? They haven't said, well, once 80% of the country is vaccinated, we open up. And that's because you've got to have equities and you've got to make sure that everyone's sort of looked after. It's no use if, 90% of Pākehā are vaccinated and, 50% of Māori and Pacifica. We can't open up under those circumstances, right? It's no good if, everyone in the South Island's vaccinated and nobody in South Auckland or the North Shore is, because that's where all the outbreaks have been. And so, it was just a real dick move from him. He could have made the same point. And it would have still been a bad point. It wouldn't have had any logic to it. But he could have made the same point by blurring out the code and not making it look like he was actually trying to undermine the actual, efforts to vaccinate. And even then, it would have just been a stupid thing to say because it would
it'd still be punching down, eh?
I don't even think it's. I just think he got everything on this wrong. Like every sort of basic assumption that you could make in relation to it. The idea that. Even the idea that Māori are being prioritised is just wrong. It's not true. If there's one site where Māori will get to skip one big queue to join another big queue, that's fine. Who cares?
Special treatment for Māori. The special treatment is 50% more likely to die from COVID.
It's just
so special.
I mean, it is annoying because the other thing is we know that Māori vaccination rates are falling behind. Last week, Peony Henare and Kelvin Davis announced, I think it was an extra, it was about $20 million or something to help whānau water providers and iwi with their COVID responses, and that included getting the logistics of rollouts because the government finally seems to recognise that there has been a problem getting to that last mile of, the vulnerable communities. I actually think the government's vaccination comms has not been great over the last 6 months. It seems to have ramped up now. It's good that the Prime Minister's boosting it. Things seem to have picked up since the outbreak, but I don't know. I think they missed a trick on it, just like they have with vaccination in general.
Well, they've now announced without announcing. It was as the Labour government has become so expert at doing, there was an announcement of an announcement today, and we will learn more probably tomorrow or the next day about whether there's been a swap or some kind of extra purchase of Pfizer vaccine stocks so that the current commendably high rate of vaccination can be continued. Annabelle, have you had your vaccine yet? Your first dose?
Yeah, remember, I had my first dose. And
we talked about that last week, didn't we? You got. That's right. You got.
Do you think it's because of what I said that?
Yeah, do you think it's what I said that got it closed up? Because, you know, they've closed it down now, they're moving that vaccination. Do you think that was me? Hey, but just in terms of the announcement about the extra vaccines, have you guys heard of that paperclip theory? Like you swap a paperclip and you hope to trade it all the way up to
to a house.
Well, that's like, so that's like me and my mixers. So the idea is like you swap a paperclip for something a bit bigger and then you swap it for something all the way until you get a house.
Okay.
So that's what we're doing with the Pfizer vaccines. We're starting with my mixers, my drink mixers.
Okay.
We're going to trade our way up until we get like a massive delivery of Pfizer.
And you're going to have lots of booster shots.
Help me out, Aotearoa. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Many doses. All right. Thanks, everybody. Lovely to talk into your ears. Thanks, Te Aihe. Thanks, members. Thanks, Spinoff. Thanks, Annabelle. Thanks, Ben. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Talofa lover, I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spinoff. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spinoff member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spinoff. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spinoff member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spinoff Podcast Network.